All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and our latest BCBA exam practice set. We're going through this set together, breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. As always, when you pass, please let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. Lane, who just passed their behavior analyst exam, is hired and put in a 30-day probationary period according to company policy. During that period, Lane is told by her boss to pick up dry cleaning and write treatment plan updates for clients who are not hers. She is constantly reminded of the probationary period. What type of relationship is this according to the ethical code? Now, the new ethical code is much clearer and much more precise on what it is you should be doing in ethical scenarios. So on the exam, when you get an ethical question, they're typically going to be pretty black and white. Now, in real life and in practice, we know it's not always that black and white. On the exam, we need to go by what the code says. In this case, we've got Lane. They just passed their behavior analyst exam. They're hired, put on this probationary period. Now, the boss is telling Lane to pick up dry cleaning, write treatment plans for clients who are not hers. And at the same time, she's reminding her of the probationary period, which in a way is a little bit of a threat. But what's the problem there? Well, the boss is exploiting Lane. She's using her position of authority, her position of power over Lane to get Lane to do things that she probably shouldn't be doing, especially picking up dry cleaning for her boss. So, according to the ethical code, what type of relationship would this be? A multiple relationship. When we talk about a multiple relationship, we're really talking about a relationship that has crossed between professional and personal. So we, for instance, are getting too friendly with stakeholders. That is a multiple relationship. This is more along the lines of an exploitative relationship. It's still professional, but it's exploitative because the boss is exploiting Lane based on their position of authority. I mean, this can happen between supervisees and supervisors. This can happen for, in this case, bosses and employees. You can't be exploited by your boss because of their position over you. See a standard relationship. This is certainly not a standard relationship. Indeed, it is definitely not a socially valid relationship. Think about if you had an adult client trying to get a job. Is this a socially valid way to treat people or be in relationships? Absolutely not. We would never teach this as the standard. If you're in an exploitative relationship, it's not okay. And at the same token, when you pass your exam, which you're going to do, and you start to train and manage people, you need to be careful about not exploiting them based on your position. So, what type of relationship is it between Lane and the boss? It's B, an exploitative relationship. New research indicates that a mindfulness approach combined with behavior analysis leads to improved outcomes for adults with disabilities. Timmy decides to get a license as a mindfulness coach and combine it with his behavior analytic skills. If Timmy wants to remain ethical in his service, what must he be sure of? Right, back-to-back ethics questions. To handle them just the same, okay? The test is in no particular order, in no particular format. There's no difficulty scale. Your job is to answer the question in front of you. Don't argue with the question. Don't debate the question. Answer the question in front of you. So in this case, we've got mindfulness approach is now said when combined with behavior analysis leads to improved outcomes. Timmy says, I'm going to get a license as a mindfulness coach, and I'm going to combine it with behavior analytic skills. If he wants to remain ethical, what must he be sure of? So the real question here is, when using other forms of treatment outside of behavior analysis, what are the rules and what are the standards? So if Timmy wants to remain ethical, what must he do? A, he remains in good standing with the BACB. Absolutely, right? He should not misrepresent behavior analysis. He should not misrepresent himself. He should not claim mindfulness is behavior analytic. They have to be separate. So, most importantly, he must remain in good standing with BACB. A is a good answer. Let's keep reading. We always read all of our answer choices. B, he does not misrepresent behavior analysis when advertising his mindfulness training. Good. It must be clear in advertising. There's a difference between these two things, right? He cannot go around even unintentionally conveying that these two things are the same thing, that mindfulness and behavior analysis are the same thing, okay? In advertising, they must be very, very distinct. C, he is conceptually systematic when providing services as a behavior analyst. Just because he goes and does mindfulness coaching, if he's combining it with behavior analysis, then now he still has to abide by the BACB ethical code, by our dimensions of behavior analysis, where all his service still must be conceptually systematic and behavioral and follow our behavior principles. Even though he's using mindfulness, he's licensed. If he plans to do it in a behavior analytic way, it must remain conceptually systematic. So what this really is saying, and what this part of the ethical code is really saying, is if you're going to work as a BCBA, as a behavior analyst, and you're going to provide other interventions using behavior analysis as kind of the foundation, you must still abide by everything the BACB says, by everything our task list says. So if Timmy wants to remain ethical, he must remain in good standing. He cannot misrepresent himself or behavior analysis when advertising mindfulness, and he must remain conceptually systematic. So D, all the above. You and your friends are hanging out on a Friday when you suddenly start craving chips and queso. You tell your friends, so you get in the car and start driving around looking for restaurants. You see a Las Palmas and say, Las Palmas. It says most likely what type of verbal operant. All right, a little bit of a teaching question here. When we're thinking impure tax, okay, we're thinking impure tax. It's not an impure mand. These are considered impure tax. And what is an impure tact? Well, when we combine a tact and a mand together, we get an impure tact. In this case, you're craving chips and queso. That is the MO. The value of chips and queso goes up. It's an establishing operation. You want chips and queso. What do? Your behavior changes. You get in the car. You start driving around. You then see Las Palmas, and you point and say, Las Palmas. So you're tacting this Las Palmas restaurant in conjunction with the motivating operation for chips and queso. So when we combine a mand and a tact, it is an impure tact. It's not an intraverbal, right? Because you didn't respond to any verbal SD. And it's not an echoic, because again, you didn't respond to any verbal SD. The combination of a mand and a tact is an impure tact. A baseball player drinks half a cup of water and taps his helmet 3 times before he goes up to bat. He does this every time it is his turn at bat. What is the most likely explanation for this behavior? Okay, so we have a baseball player who's going up to bat. Every time he does, he drinks half a cup of water and taps his helmet 3 times before he goes up to bat. And he does it every single time. In other words, he's superstitious. This is superstitious behavior. So what you're really answering in a question like this is, what is the most likely explanation for superstitious behavior? So when we are superstitious, right, we are doing things that right before other things that we hope will cause something else, right? In other words, we think there's a functional relationship between knocking on wood and good luck, right? And in reality, there's really no functional relationship. There's no functional relationship between drinking half a cup of water, tapping his helmet, and then going up to bat and having a successful at bat. What most likely happened to cause this behavior, to start this behavior chain? A contiguous relationship exists between the water, the helmet, and a successful at bat. Yes. So when we talk about superstitions, we're really talking about contiguity or closeness. The reason superstitions occur is because at some point in the past, he did these random behaviors. He drank half a cup of water, he tapped his helmet 3 times, and then he had success. So he was positively reinforced. Now, is there any functional relationship? No, very unlikely, right? But what happened was the relationship between these behaviors were contiguous and they were close in time, meaning they become one strong behavior chain. B, a functional relationship exists between the water, the helmet, and successful at bat. It's much more likely that A is the right answer. Can we rule out B entirely? No, you can never really rule it out unless we do a true experimental design, but it's much more likely that a contiguous relationship exists with these behaviors. C, a contiguous relationship exists between water, helmet, and an unsuccessful at bat. If he were to do these things, drink water, tap his helmet, and then not have success, right? So either be positively or negatively punished, there's a good chance he's not continuing to do these behaviors. The reason these continue is because a contiguous relationship exists between these behaviors and some sort of consequence, some sort of reinforcement. D, there's not a reasonable explanation. Determinism says there is a reasonable explanation for behavior, so we shouldn't pick D. Most likely, there's a contiguous relationship between these behaviors and the consequences, leading to superstition. Which of the following is true about partial interval recording? So we're looking for something true about partial interval recording. A, it tends to overestimate the rate of high count behavior. B, it tends to overestimate total duration. C, partial interval recording is the most sensitive type of measurement. Or D, it is never accurate. Well, let's immediately eliminate D, because partial interval recording, although discontinuous and often less accurate than continuous measurement, can certainly be accurate. Now, what about C? Partial interval recording is the most sensitive type of measurement. Well, that's certainly not true, because it is discontinuous, right? It's intermittent, and continuous measurement is just always going to be more sensitive than a partial interval recording. Especially there's different types, there's different lengths of intervals, right? So it could be more or less sensitive. It's definitely not the most sensitive type. So if we look at A, it tends to overestimate the rate of high count behavior. Think about partial interval recording and what you're doing. If I have a 20-second interval and the behavior happens 10 times, how many data points am I going to have for responses? You're going to have one, right? The whole thing with partial interval recording is if the behavior occurs, we mark a response, no matter how many times it occurs. So we're not overestimating the rate of high count behavior. We're really underestimating the rate. But what is true is it tends to overestimate total duration for that same reason. If I have a 20-second interval, I'm only marking a data point for did it happen or not. So if you look at it, if a naive observer looked at it, they would say, well, it happened 20 seconds. Maybe not. It might have happened 1 second. The data indicate, though, that it happened the entire duration, because all we have is a singular data point indicating, yes, it happened, no, it didn't. So what is true about partial interval recording is B, it tends to overestimate duration. Nurse Roberts tells Elliot that the third floor hallway is always slippery and to avoid walking fast when she is up there. Yesterday, Elliot slipped when she was walking on the third floor, so today she walked as slow as she could. Elliot's behavior is what? All right, we're looking at Elliot's behavior. What is Elliot doing? Well, Elliot, right, slipped when she was walking on the third floor, so today she walked as slow as she could. Okay, well, prior to that, Nurse Roberts tells Elliot that the third floor hallway is always slippery and to avoid walking fast when she is up there. But today, Elliot slipped when she was walking on the third floor, so today she walked as slow as she could. Now, had Elliot listened to Nurse Roberts prior to slipping, that would have been rule governed. Because rule governed behavior is when behavior is established through a simple verbal statement, right? If Nurse Roberts says don't walk fast on a hallway and you don't, and you've never had an experience of slipping, that's rule governed. But Elliot did slip when she was walking on the third floor. What happened is it reduced that behavior. So now she walked as slow as she could, right? So what happened was her behavior was contingency shaped, because her behavior changed due to something that actually happened, due to a consequence. Nurse Roberts telling Elliot is simply a rule. Not yet been a consequence for it. However, yesterday, Elliot slipped because there was a consequence. And that's putting it pretty simply. A rule is simply a verbal statement that establishes behavior. A contingency is, if you do this, then this will happen. And that's what happened with Elliot. You walked on the third floor and you slipped. So today you walked as slow as you could. So her behavior is now contingency shaped. It is not positively reinforced, right? Because her behavior decreased, okay? And then D, none of the above. Well, no, it is going to be contingency shaped. What would be the ideal way to conduct a preference assessment with 10 different children? All right, question like this, okay, we've got a group of children, and you've always got to think a little differently when you've got large groups of kids, right? Because the first thing we think when we have multiple clients is individualization, okay? So if you have 2 clients, you shouldn't be using the same treatment plan, the same behavior plan for those 2 clients. It needs to be individualized, even if they're identical twins, right? You have to conduct individual assessments for each of them. Okay? One of the highlights of ABA is how individualized it can get. With that said, if we have 10 different children, how are we going to conduct a preference assessment for 10 different kids? A, pick 4 or 5 popular items and have kids rank their favorites. All right, it's not horrible, right? We get 4 or 5 items we think kids like, and then we have the kids rank their favorites. It's not the worst thing in the world. There are some flaws, right? Especially if you're working with maybe the autism population who has sometimes eclectic taste or different taste than what a quote unquote popular item would be considered, right? So it's not the worst thing in the world to go pick 4 or 5 popular kids' items and then show the kids. Chances are that most, if not all, kids will find at least one item they like. A isn't the worst. Is there a better way, however, to conduct this preference assessment? More systematic. B, look online for what kids their age enjoy and buy the 2 most popular items. B is much worse than A because you're not even involving the kids. 1. 2, there's a lot less choices. And 3, age is very, very subjective, especially when you're working with a population with disabilities or delays. Age is very subjective. Okay, so B is just not a good way to identify preferences for 10 different children. C, use a paired choice assessment for each child using available stimuli. Good. C, we are now conceptually systematic. We're being very empirical about it, and we're using an actual assessment for every single child. A is fine. It's okay. C is just much better. Using all available stimuli you have, you're going through the process. It might take a while, right? But you're going through the process of using an actual paired choice assessment for each and every child. And at the end, you're going to actually have an established hierarchy for every single kid in the group based on what you have available. And D, ask each child's parents what they like. It's fine to start with, right? Maybe they'll give you some insight into what the kid may or may not like. But end of the day, we need a direct, systematic, empirical assessment using what we have available for each child. It has to be individualized. That is the key. Yes, it takes longer. Yes, it's harder, but it's what must be done, okay, to ensure the best treatment for every single child. Excellent. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass, please let us know. As always, work hard, study hard, and we'll see you soon.